I'm going to talk a little bit about the H2O Ohio program on a high level, just because it connects to our OACI project. And so I'll be able to answer some questions on that. I know there's bits and pieces of it being talked about today or tomorrow, so if you caught some of those talks, great. If not, I can at least give you the highlights, and we'll go from there. So I'm here to talk about the Ohio Agriculture Conservation Initiative, so OACI, so another acronym for you guys to remember when it comes to ag groups. And we're essentially the first of its kind group of commodity groups from all over the state, environmental groups and also conservation groups, along with Ohio State, Heidelberg, and kind of the usual suspects on water quality. So a group that has come together to essentially be the private entity that's to be cliche, the boots on the ground, the sales force for H2O Ohio and other water quality programs as we move forward. So that's the responsibility of that group. So just to give you an overview, I know it's hard to see, what the H2O Ohio program is. How many people were at one of the 8 rollout meetings previously? So good. So some of you have seen it, some of you haven't. So Governor DeWine opened up $100 and some million for H2O Ohio for around the state. 30 million of that has been allocated for the Department of Agriculture on these 10 BMPs that they have identified as the best bang for your buck BMPs. So not exactly the only things that work or the things that work the best, but the things that they've identified to reduce total phosphorus on a kind of per dollar basis. So the first one that you can sign up for is your VNMP, so you'll get money for having a voluntary nutrient management plan, which involves your soil testing and things like that. So you'll get $2. You get $10 over a 4-year period, so $2 an acre as you sign up, and then $2 for the next 4 years. And then you'll have variable rate phosphorus, so you get $8 an acre for variable rate phosphorus. The third one is subsurface placement of that phosphorus. You get $30 an acre for that. The fourth one is manure incorporation. So if you have manure in your farm, then you can get I think it's $25 for chicken litter, and then $60 for swine or anything other than chicken litter. There's some stipulations around that, so if you are involved with that, you should probably check with your soil and water. And then you have a conservation crop rotation, so there's a small grains and a forage component to that gives you some money as well. I think that's $25 or $30 an acre, or maybe $35. And then you'll have your cover crops, so your typical cover crop program, so you'll get $25 an acre for that. And then the seventh one that they're really pushing is drainage water management structure. So if you're so inclined to have flat enough ground to do that, then there's $1,500 to get those put in, and if you need to put a sub main in, you can get that for $4,000. So it's just this year for those 14 counties that are highlighted above, and so it's the Maumee watershed, and then any counties that have a pretty significant amount that are inside and outside the county, they're keeping it as a whole county that are involved in the program. So case in point, Mercer County, 45% of it's in the watershed, but they're going to take the whole county just so it's not too confusing for the farmers and the soil and waters that are putting it out. So we speak of this as kind of a we're at the doorstep of a really precarious time in water quality. I've been with Farm Bureau for 5 years. It was kind of on the heels of Toledo's water crisis, and here we are at a situation where we've kind of complained a little bit as a farm group that the government wants to do certain things, an administration wants to do certain things, but there's no plan, there's no workforce, there's no funding. Well, kind of here we are. They have a plan, they have a workforce and soil and water, and they have funding. And so, that's kind of the thing that they're saying is they've listened, we're putting these things out. And from a Farm Bureau standpoint, we like to bring the boogeyman out a little bit and talk about regulation, because we know it's a hot topic, but he's kind of knocking at the door right now. And especially with the types of rains that we're having and the field conditions, it's a precarious situation we're in right now. But if you're in those 14 counties for this year, there's funding available. It's going to roll out further and further out as time goes on, so that if you're outside of that watershed, you'll get some funding over time to maybe dabble in certain things that maybe you didn't want to risk some of your own funding on in particular. So that's kind of the very high level H2O Ohio overview. You have a question, sir? Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. So he says the watershed is not just Ohio, there's Indiana and Michigan. We can control what we can control. I'm Ohio Farm Bureau, this is Ohio taxpayer money, and we're doing what we can do. We have the most regulations on water quality for farmers than any state in the country. In terms of how you can put your fertilizer, when you can put it, licensing, and all that stuff. And so I think we've been kind of on the forefront of it, and we do get maybe a brunt of the punishment. But you know, you talk to some of our counterparts in Indiana, and they say, well, once you stop shipping your chicken litter across the state line, then we can talk. So some of that nutrients is coming right back down the pike at us, but I don't know about that, honestly. We work with our partners around the states and the countries as well as we can, but you know, just like when someone says, what about the geese and what about whatever else, I say, let's just focus on, you know, what we can control on our piece of land and keep it moving, and hopefully the rain doesn't come like it did last night, and we'll be in better shape. So that's as best answers I have for you on that one. Any other questions as we move forward? Good. Yep. Yeah, so I think eventually, so not this first rollout, but I think it'll creep further and further out from the Maumee. I would say maybe Western Lake Erie Basin will be the next swath, and then it'll go further and further out. I think one of the biggest issues is this is being administered by the Soil and Water, so it's a big undertaking to get 88 counties trained in the same thing, you know, all in one fell swoop. So I think it's going well so far. It's been a lot of work for Soil and Waters, but I think you guys will benefit probably from a more refined system as it moves forward, and probably have a better idea of what you can do on your farm, because it's been a pretty fast and swift rollout, and I think it'll give you more time maybe to plan for some of the money that could be coming your way in the near future. Sir, in the back, way back. An extremely high amount of participation. So we've had 8 farmer rollout meetings in the last 3.5 weeks, and we had about 2,500 farmers at those meetings between the 8. So you guys see it here, right? You know, you can put together a good program, and you can have a sandwich and give out a hat, and you can get 25 farmers in the building. But when you rolled out the type of money that the government's rolling out for these, that's fairly unencumbered for once, you get 400 or 500 farmers showing up on Wednesday night when they usually are at church. That's a big deal. As many of that 2.3 million as you can get. I mean, I think sign up has gone very well so far. You know, they've had hundreds of thousands of acres already signed up. Those are crop acres, so they're encumbered over multiple seasons, but it'll be, I would say, in the millions of acres over the next 4 years that are rolled out in this program. So it's a pretty significant amount. Sir, in the way back. Yeah, so what happens when they blow through that 30 million? So that's a great question, and I think we'll probably have the ammo here real soon to say the 30 million is already tied up. Then they go back to controlling entity, the controlling board, to go back to the legislation and say, can we get more of that money that has been set aside? There's about $86 million that was set aside that was not directed to any other departments, and so I think they'll go back and ask for more of that money, because the farmers are proving that if you put a logical program together and you set it at the right price for them to take that leap, then they're coming to the table, and they're gonna try to get those practices out. Sir?
I think the answer to that is look at Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
You know, once they put the enabling legislation in, you know, the money was always there. They kept spending it, reached out to shift it every last one.
Yeah, he said, look at Chesapeake Bay. Once there was money available, then, you know, farmers, a consistent stream of money, farmers were there. And I think we hope to do that without having to get so much red tape. You know, keeping it voluntary, keeping it flexible. You guys know in here how many different soil types are in the room and different management styles. And, you know, we talk about the benefits of certain practices. And you know, we want to make sure that everyone has that flexible kind of a la carte, you know, menu to do what works on their piece of ground within reason. And as you keep coming here and seeing the data that's coming out of the research, that hopefully you can keep refining your efforts. So I'll keep it moving, and I can do some questions as we get further on. The reason why we want to go into this from OACI standpoint is essentially we have two programs but one mission. So we talk about, there's probably been many talks this year and previous years about farmer data, privately held information. And so what OACI is for this program is the private entity that's going to be kind of getting people into the system. And we're going to do that in two ways. So one of them is going to be this voluntary program that is a certification program. So essentially that's what it is. You're going to be certified as a farmer. So you'll go on very high level information to say, this is what I'm doing on my farm. And then you kind of be evaluated in that way. We hear a lot of times from farmers in this water quality era that we're in, I've been doing the right stuff. I do it, maybe my neighbor doesn't, but I'm doing the right stuff. I'm continuing to spend my own money. I'm progressing. Well, this is a way for you to literally pound that certification sign at the end of your driveway and say, I have been proven by my commodity groups, by the environmental groups, by conservation groups that I'm doing the right thing, and we can keep moving you up the conservation ladder. And that'll help this scenario. So it'll help as we get tens of millions of dollars and hundreds and millions of acres of conservation practices on the ground. And what if the lake doesn't clear up? Or what if it does? Either way, we know that farmers stepped up and did what they were supposed to do, and we can keep evaluating the situation. We can keep picking at the science and say, okay, what is it? What exactly is happening here? And we can make sure that we can really drill down and help move the situation in the right direction. Or there's going to be situations where you may need some help on your farm. You may need to shine a light on a piece of your operation that you need some different funding, you need some different education, you need help with finding a piece of equipment that you need. And that's where OACI kind of comes in and maybe jumps in and does this. The certification project is going to be administered by your soil and water, so they'll be the ones that will help work you through the system and kind of be that continuous sales point from what the H2O Ohio dollars are. And then all this is funded by that group that's put together. And I kind of roll back, and sometimes I think I should start with this slide, but I kind of like level setting back at it. This is a very contentious time, and just in general in America, and with this water quality issue and what we're facing in Ohio, this is the group that makes up OACI currently. And you notice your commodity groups. Some of you are probably a member of one or some of them. You notice some other ones on there that are generally people who are maybe even testifying against some of the commodity groups, are shouting in the back when maybe there's a new CAFO that's asking for a permit. But in this situation, they decided to come to the table to make up for logical solutions for farmers. So instead of shouting in the back or opposing some sort of plan, we're all at the table together and we're working in one direction. And we've worked thousands of hours on these programs. We haven't had 1 minute of contention. And so I kind of like to point that out, because it's easy for us to say, especially as Farm Bureau, we have people who said, well, you did something to my grandfather in 1932 and we haven't been members since, and that's fine. But people can change, people can evolve, and some of these environmental groups are evolving. They're starting to realize that there's a bigger thing going on than just fertilizer and manure going on farm fields. There's something more going. It's not egregious. There's a change happening. There's more water coming onto the system. How do you create broader plans for not just your nutrients but your water management? There's all sorts of things that we've been helping kind of guide them along, and I think it's coming a long way to coming to this point where you can have some of these groups come together and be kind of arm in arm with your commodity groups in a situation that's pretty precarious. So I kind of like to point that out, because I think that's a very novel thing that's happening in our society right now, to have your environmental groups and your commodity groups moving in a logical direction. So I've kind of gone through some of this because I want to make sure there's time for questions. So I'm going to move to kind of what the data you'll have to input for your certification program. So one of the things that I probably blew through is that part of your signing up for your H2O Ohio funding is that you're going to be in this system. And so that just means that in the first year of your funding, you just need to be in the system that just says who you are, where you farm. It takes 3 minutes to fill out. And it's something that at least allows us to help identify who's doing what so that we can help get the resources to where it needs to go. And then in year 2, we were asking people to be certified. And that sounds a little scary to some farmers, but in order to get your H2O Ohio funding, you're going to need a nutrient management plan, that voluntary nutrient management plan, kind of a stripped down version that ODA wants you to have. Well, that's kind of going to be our certification line. So if you have the right, soil testing, you're following Tri-State, you're doing some of the things that they're going to ask you to do with that voluntary nutrient management plan, that's the dividing line to be certified. And then there's a lot of headspace there for us to help you work your way up the conservation ladder depending on what you're doing. So it may sound like maybe a bare minimum to some people, but it allows us to work people up to that bare minimum. It allows us to enough headspace so we can evaluate and help move that wide range of farmers up the conservation ladder. We have a lot of farmers who have been doing some extraordinary things over the years, and we want to make sure that this system doesn't preclude them from being recognized for that, and we think that's a big deal. I think, I'm in the chapel, I'm preaching essentially, I'm on my soapbox, but peer pressure is a big part of the solution when it comes to this water quality issue. We think that talking to your fellow farmers, talking to your neighbors, getting on YouTube, Twitter, going to talks like this, seeing what everyone's doing, moving in the same direction as a collective mass is a huge part of this. They make me wear a suit jacket, but I grew up on a pig farm. I grew up on a grain farm. I know how hard it is. I lived it, and but it helps when you can hear it from someone else that has gone through the trenches and the same trenches that you guys are and getting the same rain and the same commodity prices and the same legislation. And so I think peer pressure and talking to your neighbors and really just holding each other up and holding each other accountable is a big reason why this is going to happen. And so with this system, it allows you to be evaluated to a certain degree, but on a very high level. We're not asking for soil test information or yield information or anything like that. It's soil testing, so are you doing it, how often, and what grid. How are you getting your nutrient management recommendations? What rate, what are you following Tri-State broadly and things like that? How are you placing those nutrients? What's your infield management, so your tillage practices, your cover crop choices, and then anything kind of bonus, we call it, so any drainage water management structures, grass waterways, things like that. And it's not to be judged good or bad. We're not saying, hey, we want to move you to no-till, we want to move you to strip-till, we want to move you to, it's just how can we help you evaluate your situation and get you moving up the conservation ladder. And it's not anything that we want to do on a very specific level of touting one way to farming or not. It's just really to help identify those areas on your farm that you can get shored up. So I meant to have handouts, but that's kind of a last-minute addition. So if you go to OACI.org, you can see information on the program, and then you can click through and fill out that farmer profile, which is your year 1. And then they'll kind of give you, this is kind of a checklist. I know it's hard to see, but kind of a checklist of things you'll need to know to enter the system. All stuff that you probably know broadly off the top of your head. Some of our farmers that have done it have taken a few minutes to do it. And then certification year 2 is some of the other things that I've talked about, is just kind of how many acres are in certain practices. It's going to be available on a website, but it's also a smartphone app, so you can have it on your phone or tablet if you need to. These are some mock-ups of what it's going to look like. And then you'll essentially, input your own data. It'll be your own information. Your name will never be attached to any piece of information that you put in there. And then it'll be privately held for you to kind of access. And then you'll get a score. So that score is not to be necessarily good or bad or judgmental. It's just here's where I was in 2020. And when you go back in another year, you can say, here's how I've made progress. And it's really just a way for you to go into your soil and water or NRCS or wherever to say, here's how OACI has evaluated me. And it's going to be obviously very broad. And we want to make sure that we can help identify any areas of opportunity that you can miss. So it might seem a little judgy with a score, but it's really just a way, another touch point for us to keep what you're doing on your farm out of arm's reach for those that maybe want to access it for not so good things, and keep getting every opportunity available for you to gain access to funds. As the Department of Agriculture has to be responsible for the money they give out, they're going to have to go back to the legislature and say, here's what happened to our money. Here's what happened with the money that you gave us. And this is going to be a big part to say, here's all the people that have been doing this and all the acres that they've signed up. The second part, really quickly, I'll talk about is a farm field assessment. And so when we talk about how many acres of cover crops and no-till and all that stuff that are out there on the land, there's not really a good comprehensive annual or semi-annual or biannual survey, in-field survey of what is actually going on. And so we're going to partner with Soil and Waters in the lower Maumee in 7 counties for this year to do a farm field assessment. So we're going to identify 600 random fields, go out there and ask them some questions on their management. So it's very high level stuff like, is it rented or owned? Did you, till or no till, or what type of tillage, your soil testing. So about 30 some questions that shouldn't take very long to identify what happened on this, 50 acre field or 25 acre field, so that we can put that together and make sure that we can know what our baseline is. What is our bouncing point of where adoption started and how far we go as time moves on, so we can be responsible for the money that's come out. Or maybe there's a county somewhere that's like, man, we just can't get cover crops going in that county, or we can't, get strip till in this county, or we can't get some aspect of what we would think is the right way to go going in some county, and help guide resources to that, and then go from there. So that's one that's, again, going to be private information. It's going to be aggregated and published without any farm names or anything like that. But it's hopefully a trusted source of information on where some of that money is going and where farmers' practices are going. I can take maybe a couple questions. That's all I have, and then I'll stick around if anybody has anything else. Sir. I'm sure you can. We want to make sure that it's not a self-selecting group. We're going to randomize the fields from the CAUV list and try to get a broad spectrum of folks. And it's not people who've already gone into federal offices or state offices. We want to make sure that we get a wide variety. As 50% of the land generally in Ohio is farmed by the person who doesn't own it, we want to make sure we really understand the decision-making that's going on owned ground and also rented ground, as that's a big piece of land that maybe people don't have all the decision-making rights on. Yes, sir.
Will there be some money for equipment? Because there's some older farmers that use the same equipment, but to step up to some of these practices will need assistance on, being able to afford that and the management.
Yeah. So will there be money for equipment? ODA is very shy on helping people buy equipment that they could eventually sell. But I think the money is right on the amount that they're doing per acre, that I think you can maybe pencil some stuff out if you do need a piece of equipment in the long term. But there isn't anything right now that I know of, or specifically with H2O Ohio, that they're going to do equipment purchasing, because I think they're a little skittish of that. Possibly. Some of them may do some stuff. They may have a strip till unit or a cover crop unit of some sort, but they're not doing it specifically in this program, but there might be other monies available. So it might be just county specific. Yes, sir. For the OACI program, we'll take all comers that come into it, but we don't really have any funding. We just have a system that they can go into, but the H2O Ohio funding is just for those 14 counties for now, but the certification system is open for anybody who would want to enter it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How is it decided which 10 practices would be funded? I assume all the coalition partners had a vote or had some kind of input?
They kind of scanned all the research that was out there and any data that was available and kind of came up with that list. It started with hundreds of practices and just got whittled down. They're going to be very flexible, and you'll see some changes over time as more information comes available. But they scoured whatever published research was out there to kind of hit.
Will that scoring that the districts do, will that
Yeah.
affect that? You think for future, or
The scoring.
will have a big difference on?
The scoring won't affect how much funding you're getting. It's just a way to evaluate what you're doing on your farm. It's just another tool that you can use. I think you'll see more incentives come into the program. Maybe premiums where you sell your grain, things like that. So we're still working on some of those higher level stuff that's maybe outside of that H2O Ohio system. Yes, sir. No, it is not. It's not in the Ohio Revised Code or anything. It's a private organization that's doing it. Our main concern is having to kind of be a trusted private entity for farmers to give their information, and we don't want someone's home addresses or anything being subject to any public records requests or anything like that. And we think we can move swifter and broader outside of the government system and try to get as many farmers in the queue as possible. No, we don't have any money flow from the state. It's all organizations that are a part of OACI that are funding the program.
Is the certification a required thing for getting the money?
Eventually, certification will be required for getting the money. It's just a way for us to help, kind of gather that data. You just have to be in the system by the time that you get money for whatever programs you signed up for. So it could be months down the road for most people. So.